Story 1. I was around 8 when we moved into an old house/shop combination. The bottom is a commercial building with a big open room, a kitchen and 2 medium-sized rooms connected to each other, and one connected to the open room upstairs is the living space. The layout of the bottom is fairly important. Also, the kitchen leads to the stairs, but you cannot see the kitchen from the open room, so we moved in, and from the start I des the place. I got bad, horrible, dare I say, energy from the place, and I don't tend to get that. In the open room there was a large painting with a strange representation of what would seem to be a rapture event, a burning cross on top of a large Bible, a church with a crowd surrounding it, and a river on fire. Every time I would walk by this painting my stomach sank horribly. Imagine watching someone you love die. We got rid of this painting very soon after we left, but the energy from that spot remained. The previous owners were an older couple, but the husband had died about 5 years before we moved in, leaving the lady as a widow. She was strange. They had lived there for 2 decades, and she was so emotionless. Obviously this could be grief, but it was 5 years ago that he died. She was extremely emotionless, as if she was dead in the body of a living person. She had this look in her eyes, as if she'd seen unimaginable things. Anyways, we moved in nonetheless, and there were already problems everywhere. You were upstairs, you would be watched by something, but always watched. There was a mirror in the front of the stairs that I swear was cursed, and I could not look in that thing without having a panic attack. My room went dark. I literally couldn't go into my body. Restricted me. Now, the lady that lived there did not clean the place. There were strangely piles of flies everywhere. They seemed like they were an offering of some sort, the way they were laid out in a perfect mound. Now, into the actual events, there actually weren't many, but the few that did happen were major. For one, soon after we moved in, my aunt came over. My aunt is more like my older sister. Long story. Anyways, soon after she left, she told me at a family gathering that when she was there she saw a 4-legged creature that had the face of a human but long stretched hind legs and long teeth. You might think she was trying to scare me, but she isn't the type, I promise. Then we took a photo of nothing important but a photo. This photo had a face in it, a humanoid face that was completely pale white with pitch black eyes and no hair. The structure was no oval, not a human head, like a stretched oval. Anyways, the next day my mom and I went down to the cellar. The cellar door was next to the spot that had a large painting in it. When we went into the cellar, the door locked behind us. The door's lock had 2 steps that couldn't be done by accident. It was a chain with a little latch you see everywhere. When we closed the door, the chain was down near the floor, nowhere near the latch. This happened when me and my mom were home alone with no one able to let us out for hours. We were trapped in there for a while. This was the last straw for us, and we decided to move out. I was about 7 years old, my brother about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mom woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was often just the 3 of us at the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of a hallway. Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway, our window doors we always kept locked, and ly used the door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to a back porch. My brother and mom both had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only knew this because I was always a light sleeper, and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. I'm going to try to pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk to the bathroom. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I don't know if my mom wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try to scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it, but she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. Years later, when I was 18, my mom and I were having a conversation in her car about a dog we had for a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendencies toward destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviors when my mom blurted out, "Do you remember the time that I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open that big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise because in all the years I Lived in that house. We never once called the cops. I asked her what she was talking about, and she looked equally surprised as if she just revealed something by accident. Oh, that's right, I never told you because you were too young at the time. One night, I woke up hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked I saw a man staring into my bedroom. She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running, and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up. Tall white male wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now, I know it sounds so obvious hearing those two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years later in my mid-20s that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who had spent multiple nights casing our home. I went to the local grocery store tonight around 5 p.m. It's winter and getting dark by 5 p.m. Where I live. I was in an aisle taking my time deciding between the options when this late 20s, early 30s looking guy with light features, glasses, and a scruffy beard comes up right next to me and just stands there. I didn't think much of it, or even look at him at first, because I figured whatever, he's just looking too. But then after a few seconds I noticed he wasn't moving or doing anything, just standing there. So I looked at him and he was already staring at me, and for half a second I thought he might say something to me, so I stood there for a second just looking back at him. He didn't say anything, so I just turned and fast walked away. At this point I'm thinking, okay, that was weird, but whatever, probably just an awkward guy who doesn't know how to talk to women. Then not 30 seconds later I'm in another aisle and I see him out of the corner of my eye coming down the aisle I'm in again, staring right at me. So again I walked away as fast as I could and just went right to the self-checkout. While I was at self-checkout, I'm looking over my shoulder the whole time, making sure he isn't behind me anymore, and he's not. I start walking out of the store, relieved that once again I was just being paranoid and I wasn't ever in any real danger. As I'm walking out, I decide to look behind me one more time, and there he is, right behind me. I then notice he has nothing in his hands, no groceries, and he's heading towards the door right on my heels. Without even thinking, I just stopped dead in my tracks. I look at him again. He's already looking at me, and then he puts his head down looking at his phone and walks past me out the door. He bought nothing. I'm so scared at this point. My head is spinning. I didn't know what to do. I can see my car because I parked close to the exit, so I call my fiancé and sprint as fast as I can to my car. I jump in, lock the doors, and start looking for this guy. Then I see him. He's aimlessly walking around the parking lot. Through the cars, he's pretty far away from me at this point, and I have my fiancé on the phone, so I'm feeling somewhat safe again. I watched him walk around for another few seconds before I got out of there. I have no idea what this guy was doing or what his motive could have been. Maybe he was just a weird guy who doesn't know how to talk to girls, or maybe he was a predator with dangerous intentions, or maybe he thought I looked like easy prey for a robbery. The thing I really can't wrap my head around is the fact that each time I noticed him he was already staring at me. He was not discreet at all, and I would think a dangerous predator might be a little more inconspicuous. He also didn't buy anything from the grocery store, which I also can't understand. I was in the store about 5 minutes before I noticed him, so I'm sure he didn't follow me in the store. Am I being paranoid? There's a lot that didn't feel right, so I'm having a really hard time trying to rationalize this experience. It was definitely a creepy encounter. This guy has an affair. One time they met up at a company party and got into a fight. She then said she will tell his wife about them. He got mad and killed her that night. He took her to a quiet place nearby the party and strangled her to death. After that, he got a shovel and buried her there. The next day, some people from the company found an arm sticking out of the ground. He was too drunk to bury her entirely. They caught him and he got 9 years in jail. He visited us after getting out. Little me, who was 9 years old, had absolutely no clue what was going on, though. I just heard a small piece of the story. Anyway, the sister of the killed girl also was there. They tried to talk, but it ended up with her crying and running 20 kilometers to her home in another city. My brother and I worked across the street from a mini storage place, and roughly 2 years ago we noticed they had an auction sign out front. We decided to check it out, so we walked over hoping to find something interesting. If you haven't watched Storage Wars the way These work is the auctioneer opens the unit, and you're not allowed to enter or touch anything, and you only have a window of about 15 seconds to look around and decide if you want to bid. This unit was small 4 by 4, and my brother and I noticed a group of 5 fishing poles amongst other boxes and bags. We've been talking about buying a few poles, and this seemed like a good chance, so we yelled out a low bid and one part of the auction rules we had until the end of the day to empty out the unit. Being small, this was a 2 garbage can job, so we got a can and started sorting it. Started out promising with finding a nice microscope and a few tools and whatnot, standard storage stuff. I pulled out a plastic garbage bag and opened it to find another tight shut garbage bag, which I opened to find another tight shut garbage bag, and since nothing terrifying is ever kept in triple tight bags, I opened it to fight the dried mummified remains of a very old and very dry cat. My brother and I just stopped and stared at each other, and since neither of us needed a dried out cat at the moment, we weren't sure how to handle this specific piece of storage unit treasure. We did what we always do when faced with something that's out of context. We just laughed uncomfortably until we looked back into the unit and noticed 2 more tight garbage bags. At the end of the day, we found 3 bags with parts of or entire cats. We also aren't doctors, but we are pretty sure there were at least some dog parts in there as well. Granted, saying it was a storage unit full of dead cats would be a bit of an exaggeration, but considering that a storage unit generally has no dead cat, I think a small unit with 3 or 4 could be considered FO, as if multiple bags of dead cats wasn't bad enough. The creepiest part of the whole thing was finding his or her creepy drawings of cats and a used pink cat food and water bowl. I spoke to the manager of the facility and explained my findings, and I asked who owned that unit. Obviously they couldn't give the name, but when I asked if they were perhaps a vet, the owner laughed and said definitely not. He also said that helps explain why the person's other abandoned unit that had gone up for auction prior had been full of empty plastic cat carriers. This story is told from the perspective of a man. This incident happened just a few hours earlier, and I'm typing this story currently at my workplace. I work in the garden area of a home improvement store. I don't work the cash registers, and my manager doesn't even let me water the flowers, so a lot of the time I have nothing to do. This results in me taking extremely long bathroom breaks where I just scroll on my phone. I know it sounds bad, but it's better than standing around trying to look busy. Today was the same as any other, with me wasting time in the bathroom. Nothing of interest happened until my work phone buzzed at the same time as the stall next to mine. This becomes important later. A few seconds later, I see that the guy in the next stall had his hand stretched to the ground with his palm facing up. I at first thought he had run out of toilet paper and was asking for mine. He just stayed silent for a while, so I ignored him after that. Then he started moving that hand uncomfortably close to my leg, so I immediately screwed it away and prepared to leave once the man noticed that he hardly got out of his stall before I could leave. Another few seconds of silence. I took a peek out from the gap of the stall door to see what the hell he was doing, and just like a scene from a horror movie, our eyes connected. He was barely an inch away from the door trying to peek inside. My blood ran cold, if you're wondering why I didn't immediately open the door and cuss the guy out. I really hate confrontation. I avoid it whenever possible, and I do my best not to draw attention to myself. I stood sideways by the door so he wouldn't be able to see me. That's when the whispering started. I don't know what the first thing he said was, but it sounded like moaning. The next part was a bit more audible. He said something along the lines of wanting to see more of my unflushed toilet paper. I was thoroughly disgusted. This guy was a complete creep, and I was alone in the bathroom with him. My heart was beating faster by the second. I knew I had to stay there until another person came into the bathroom. There was no way I was going to confront him alone. Probably a minute later someone finally arrives, and I take this as my chance to wash my hands and get the hell out of there. Thankfully, the presence of the other person made the old man quit his creepy behavior. As I was about to leave, he blocked my path for a quick second before stepping aside. The weird thing was, I don't even think he works at the store, because he wasn't wearing any vest. My store is extremely lenient about uniform, but most workers at least have to wear a vest or something connected to the store. He just looked like a regular customer. I'm certain I heard phone dinks echo in that bathroom. The phones have a signature ring to them, so it couldn't have been a coincidence. Either way, he only started creeping on me once the phone ring made it clear that I was an employee. The Situation really creeped me out, and I've been totally unfocused on my work since then. I've kept prowling the garden area to look out for any old man wearing a similar outfit to the creeper. I have an incredibly hard time distinguishing faces, so I probably wouldn't even recognize him even if I did see him. So, creepy bathroom peeper, let's not meet. Again, when I was 18 and newly graduated, I ran into some issues with my attempts to enroll in college, and also had a hard time finding a job in my area in the meantime, which led me having to sign on. At the job center, they determined that I was too shy to succeed in my interviews, and placed me in a group that was supposed to teach me interview skills in order to fix that. The group ended up ultimately being a complete waste of time. I honestly think they put me in the wrong group or just needed an extra member and made an excuse to throw me in to make up the numbers, but that's not really relevant to the story, and the other group members didn't do much to help with my shyness either, since they were all men who were at least 4 decades older than me and obviously didn't share any of my interests. Unfortunately, I ended up gaining the attention of the one member I wanted nothing to do with. I don't actually remember the man's name at this point, but I think it was something generic like John, so that's what I'll call him. John immediately got off on the wrong foot with the rest of the group when he interrupted the instructor during their introduction to the course to complain that him being there was useless since he would be retiring in a few years anyway, and no one wanted to hire someone who had spent over 10 years in prison when that didn't get him the reaction he wanted. I assumed the rest of the group thought he was just attention seeking, and the instructor had heard similar things before from people who weren't happy about being in the course. He waited until we'd been given paperwork to complete, and then turned to the man next to him and loudly explained his prison sentence was for beating his ex-wife, but that she was a lying, and he never put a hand on her. She didn't even have any bruises on her at the trial, or any evidence of bruises or other injuries before that either, but because she was a woman, the judge automatically believed her and sent him to jail. This immediately set me on edge. I'm not an expert when it comes to the law, but I do watch true crime channels on YouTube, and I never heard of a sentence of over 10 years for a single beating that supposedly never even happened or didn't leave visible injuries. Either Joan was lying and had severely beaten his wife to the point of putting her in hospital, or he'd been arrested on other charges and was covering up what he actually went to prison for. I immediately decided I wanted nothing to do with him, regardless of which one it was, and would avoid interacting with them as much as possible outside of polite and passing him things if he asked. Like I said before, I didn't really interact much with the other members of the group at all because of their ages. I attended the first half of the meeting in the morning, spent the dinner break in the library, while the men all SNU off to the pub, and then went home immediately after the second half was over. No one ever asked me how I spent my breaks, and since the pub and library were in opposite directions from each other and couldn't be seen from the front of the building the group met in, because of the way the streets were arranged, there should have been no way for them to know where I had been, which made what happened next even more worrying. About halfway through the course, there was a day where I bumped into a friend on my dinner break and decided to put off visiting the library until the course was over for the day to catch up with them. Instead, when I did get around to it, I spent at least a quarter of an hour there before heading to the desk to check out my books, and ended up being drawn into a conversation by the librarian who had noticed I was checking out books related to a franchise he also enjoyed, and that was getting a new movie the next year. There were only a handful of other people in the library, so I didn't see anything wrong with talking to a friendly man around my age who shared my interests after 8 hours of boredom and paperwork. We'd been talking for another quarter of an hour when he suddenly glanced over my shoulder, looking confused, used, and concerned, and was just opening his mouth to say something when someone grabbed me by my shoulders. My friends and family know that I hate having my shoulders touched without warning. It would never have done that to me, so I immediately knew that whoever was touching me was a stranger, and I knocked their hands away while turning around and backing up into the librarian's desk. It was John. He was standing directly behind me with a huge smile on his face, and as soon as I turned around, he made a joke about knowing he would find me there and how I practically lived there before chattering at me as if we were close friends. I was just completely confused. It was obvious that he hadn't just coincidentally bumped into me from the way he was talking, but JN had been kept behind while the group was heading out because he'd filled out his paperwork incorrectly, and as I mentioned before, you can't see the library from the building, so he shouldn't have had any way of seeing where I'd gone. It had also been half an hour since I left the building, so if he'd left not long after me and just saw me go in while we were walking in the same direction, he would have come inside by then. The only way it made sense for him to know to look for me there and joke that I practically lived there would be if he somehow learned I was going to the library during dinner breaks, known I hadn't that day, and guessed I would go out after the meeting. Instead, what made that even stranger than it already was is the fact that John had never shown any interest in me during the group sessions and mostly ignored me the way I ignored him unless we were forced to interact for whatever reason. So why was he now following me into other buildings to start conversations out of nowhere and acting like we were close while John was still talking? The librarian leaned in to ask if I knew this man because he'd obviously seen my negative reaction to being touched by JN, and when I briefly explained the situation to him, he asked John politely to please leave me alone or leave the building. John refused and tried to tell the man that we were friends, completely ignoring the fact that I just said we weren't and how ridiculous it would be to claim an 18-year-old and he would be removed from the building if he refused to leave me alone. John smiled and agreed to leave in a tone that he would use when humoring a child before walking out, and very obviously stationing himself right outside the doors waiting for me to leave too. The librarian was clearly concerned by this and asked for the full story of what was going on, and I told him, including my suspicions, that John had been following me around without my knowledge to know I would be in there in the first place. He suggested I should stay in the library until his break so he could walk me to my bus stop to make sure John left me alone, but it would be several hours, and if I had waited I wouldn't have gotten home in time to change and head to another meeting I had later that evening, so he asked me to at least come in the next time I was there to let him know I was safe, and reluctantly watched me leave. John immediately stepped into my personal space when I got outside, jokingly asking what the librarian's problem was and still acting like we were friends. I tried to walk around him without answering him and head to the bus station to go home, but he grabbed me by the arm and reminded me that there was a closer stop for our bus. When I told him that we aren't getting the same bus because I'd never seen him on the same one as me, he corrected me that we both needed the number 19 bus and told me where he lived, which was in fact on the same bus route as me, although I was still tempted to walk away and go to the station instead and possibly sneakily get on a different bus and just walk the rest of the way home. It was very clear he was going to follow me if I did, because he still had a hold of my arm, refusing to let go when I tried to pull away, and there were several dark alleys on the way that I had no intention of going anywhere near while in his company. When I agreed to go to the closer bus stop, he let go of me and started walking at my side, chattering like we were good friends again. John kept walking when we reached the stop, which was odd, but I was hoping that my lack of response to anything he said had made him give up and decide to leave me alone, or that he'd mixed up that stop with one further along and I could run while his back was turned. No luck. As soon as he realized I wasn't following him anymore, John came back frowning as if he was confused and asking me I thought we were going for a coffee together. Shocked, I bluntly told him no. He kept pushing, trying to convince me that I'd agreed to go with him, and when that didn't work he switched tactics and claimed I'd mentioned while leaving the classroom that I wanted some coffee, so we thought we could go together. That was an obvious lie too, since I don't drink coffee, and told him so. John's only answer was to say I didn't have to get a coffee and kept pushing me to go to a cafe with him. I firmly told him no, and apparently he took that as me not wanting to drink in public because he attempted to invite me to his flat. If that wasn't weird enough, he started telling me that if there is a naked girl on the couch when we get there, I'm not to worry because that's his 18-year-old daughter, because an 18-year-old is definitely going to lounge around naked on her father's furniture in front of him. Right, other people at the stop were staring at us now, and I took the opportunity to point out that I was also 18 and firmly tell JN that I don't want to go to his flat with him and to leave me alone. He completely ignored the last part and tried to claim I was lying about my age and was at least 29 when most people at the time still mistook me for being in my early teens. At first glance the bus arrived at that moment, and I got on as quickly as possible, thinking I would be safe there and the driver would throw him off if need be. No. When I sat in an aisle seat to stop John sitting next to me, he physically shoved me across the seat, pinning me against the window to the point I could barely move, and pressing his knees up against the seat in front of him to make sure I had no room to get past him unless he allowed it. The only way for me to get out would have involved me straddling his lap. Since the seats in front of us were occupied, I loudly told him to move and to leave me alone, but he ignored me and continued trying to convince me to come to his flat. And although a few people gave me uncomfortable looks when I tried to make eye contact with some of the men in the hopes they would help, they would look away as if they hadn't noticed or suddenly became very interested in their phones. I spent the ride huddled against the window, trying to touch him as little as possible, and was ignored again when I shouted at him to stop touching me because he kept putting his hand on my thigh as high up as he could get without directly groping me. No one did anything about it, but he stopped touching me. After that, he had apparently also given up on convincing me to go to his flat that day, but when we were coming up to the apartment block, he pointed it out to me, physically turning my face when I refused to look, told me his apartment number, and tried to give me a kiss goodbye on the cheek, which I dodged before getting off the bus and knocking on the opposite window to try and get my attention so he could wave at me. When the bus set off again, several people started loudly talking about how disgusting he was and that men like him should be reported, while refusing to look in my direction where I was sat shaking and seething in my seat. And other than an awkward "so are you all right" from the driver just as I was about to step off the bus, no one bothered to check on me. As soon as I got home, I sent an email to the instructor telling her that I wanted to switch groups and never see that man, explaining what he had done. She read it but ignored it for an entire week, until I sent a follow-up threatening to get the police involved if they forced me to interact with the man again, and their solution was to tell me I could leave the course early instead, essentially kicking me out as if I was the problem. I bumped into that man not too long afterwards, and he tried to ask me why I hadn't been attending the group anymore, admitting that he had asked the instructor and they had refused to tell him, but I managed to get away and lose him in the crowd. I've seen him a few times in passing in the years since, but fortunately he isn't never noticed me or approached me again, and I hope it stays that way. I grew up in Wolverhampton in the West Midlands, UK. I was 12 years old, and let's just say I didn't have the easiest of upbringings. I was smoking, drinking, and staying out late around this time of my life, so I was bunking off of school. My mom was at work, and it was late morning time, around 11 a.m. I wanted to buy some cigarettes, but as I was well under the legal age, I had to hang around outside the shop and ask strangers if they would take my money and purchase them for me. About a mile and a half from my house, there was a little shop called the Spar. It was on a fairly busy road. A row of hedges lined one side with a gap that led into the field beyond, and houses on the opposite side, so I was standing maybe 15 paces from the shop, waiting for people to walk past so I could ask them to purchase my cigarettes. I usually second-guessed if they would be willing by how they looked. I asked the lady, maybe mid-40s, shoulder length, blonde hair, black business trousers, pink elbow-length jumper, looked like she smoked, and she said no. I asked the EY, maybe mid-50s, shaved brown hair. He was wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt. He ignored me, so I was getting desperate by this point, and decided upon asking anybody that came by. Then I see a rather disheveled-looking man coming up the road towards me past the row of hedges. He was wearing dirty dark brown suit trousers and a button-up dark brown dirty velvet jacket. He had a black Bauer kind of hat on, and he kind of limped a bit as he walked. As he got closer to me, and I was trying to suss out if he looked like the type that would possibly purchase a 12-year-old cigarettes, I noticed he was probably homeless and possibly in his late 50s to early 60s, but I thought, hey, he probably smokes. I'll ask him. As he approached me, I gave him the usual line, "Excuse me, mate. Would you please go into that shop and get some cigarettes for me?" He stopped and thought for a second, then said, "How old are you?" I lied, "I'm 15, almost 16, and..." He said, "All right, which ones do you want?" and held out a really dirty hand. I gave him my money and asked him to get some 10 sovereign. I had the exact change. He goes into the shop, and I'm waiting outside, excited. I'm finally getting my cigarettes and can go home and chill out before I have to leave the house again to make it look like I've just got home from school. He comes out and gives me 20 sovereign. I'm if to say the least, and say, "But I only gave you enough money for 10, and I start panicking because I don't have any extra money on me to give him. At this point, he hooks my arm in his, holding my arm firmly to his side, and starts to walk back towards the hedge-lined road. All the while he's telling me how I can make up for not having the extra money for the cigarettes. I'm kind of stunned at this point, and my mind is blank. I guess I was in some kind of shock. He leads me through a gap in the hedges and into the field, all the while talking non-stop, still briskly walking with my arm locked in his. He's telling me how I can come to his house and help him fix the roof tiles. I'm still in silent shock. The field is huge, and I can see it leads into more fields and more fields. I can hear the cars behind me getting more distant. I can't see any houses for miles. There's just fields. He's still talking, but I'm not taking in what he's saying. My mind starts to race. I finally realize something about this isn't quite right, and I have to get away as he's walking, still holding my arm. I suddenly and violently pull back with my arm straight. My arm slides out of his very quickly, and he goes flying forwards and lands in a heap on the floor, and I take one big step backwards. I'm terrified at this point, but still in shock. I can't speak. He's laying on the ground groaning and holding his leg. It's like he's in a lot of pain. Why do you do that for? You really hurt me. Help me up. Help me up. He's holding his leg and puts his hand out for me to help him up. I'm frozen. My mind is racing so fast. I'm looking at this disheveled man right now in the eye, laying on the ground groaning like he's in pain, but something about this situation didn't sit right with me. My gut was telling me to run. Don't help him. I bought you those cigarettes, didn't I? Helped you out. Why did you do this? You've hurt me. Help me up. I take another step backwards, all the while looking into his green eyes. All of a sudden, he stops groaning and asking for me to help him up. He points his finger at me, looking me right in the eye, and says, "You're a smart girl." It was like an electric shock ran through my body, and I turn and run. I don't look back. I just run as fast as I can. When I'd gotten off the hedgeland road and turned into the next road, I slow down. As I'm out of breath, I start bawling my eyes out, and I'm shaking uncontrollably. I keep checking behind me, catch my breath, and don't stop running until I get home. At the very least, I was terrified. I bump into that man again, and I never tried to buy cigarettes from that sh not ever again. Around 2006 I was driving flatbed, picked up a load of construction material in rural Tennessee. My memory is foggy now, but I want to say between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of the Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee state lines. A tarp was required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper about 5 miles down the road in the middle of nowhere in woods on a second-lane road. I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. I found a white shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I flat just did a shitty job tarping this load and decide to redo it on the side of the road. I undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the ladder, and start unrolling the tarps again, and I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him because I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I continue what I'm doing. About the time I have the tarp set in place and I'm climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this guy's getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am towing my load. I grabbed my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working, just in case the guy gets to me, and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy as hell. It was like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process, and said, it good enough to party. The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off, like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. His clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with dirty white tennis shoes. I remember he didn't have any laces on one shoe, and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits till I acknowledge him, and just says, "I've got a long walk." I'm like, "Yeah man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere," making it clear there's no right to be had here. He nods, starts walking by me, continuing on its way, stops at about the driver door on my truck, and turns around. He comes back to me and repeats himself, "I've got a long walk." At this point, I explain to him that I can't give him a ride insurance, and all that. I apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around, and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him, and he's moving away from me as I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps. I look over to check where he's at, and he's turned around, heading back towards me now about 100 yards in front of my truck and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone. He has his hand up to his face and I can barely make out his moving mouth, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with this TRS, grab my winch bar and I'm climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away now. As soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors. I set the winch bar on the passenger seat just in case. I look at the guy and realize he's not talking on a phone, he's talking to his hand, and now I'm nervous because he doesn't look like he's having a nice pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. I crank the truck up, put it into gear and just pull out. I didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face with this dead-ass look on it, just staring at me. It gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror and there's no one there. Story 2. I grew up in Long Beach, California. From the ages of 2 to 11, there was a lot of us living near each other. I had 2 older sisters, and my next-door neighbors were my cousins. 5 of them will be focusing on the oldest of those cousins. His name was Christian, and he was one of the most sadistic people I'd ever met. He enjoyed wrecking my Lego towers, giving me wedgies until I bled, putting a pillow on my face and sitting on it. He even used my head like a step stool. Once I was too young to properly defend myself. I had a stuffed animal, the Dalmati, that I named Dale. Christian took Dale and put him in the oven and duct taped me to a chair with the oven light on in front of me so I could do nothing but watch as Dale, my best friend, but burned alive. At least in my child mind, needless to say, Christian was an up individual, but I knew something was wrong when I saw him with our cat Precious. He would use Precious's tail as a handle and swing her around, sometimes throwing her at the couch, but sometimes throwing her at the wall. He laughed especially hard when he heard the sharp little thud. She died. My parents told me that she ran away, but I knew they were lying. It didn't occur to me until years later, but eventually I understood the truth. One night my sisters had all of our cousins over and they wanted to play with Ouija board. I was a little frightened, so I stepped out into our backyard away from the Ouija board. Christian followed me outside and walked up behind me. He pressed a serrated knife into my throat from the kitchen. He was whispering things like, "What would you do if I killed you? I'm going to cut your neck and bleed you out. Why are you crying?" By this time I was hysterical. I was a 9-year-old boy sobbing and pleading for life before my sister came out and asked why I was crying so loud. Christian put the knife down so she couldn't see it. I remember running to her, clenching to her like she was my savior. For all I know, she really was. Christian tried to lie, telling her that I was being a baby about the wager board, but I was so terrified and hysterical that I screamed he was lying. I told her he put a knife at my neck. She held me and took me inside, calling my parents. When they came home, everything was away and everyone was gone except my sister and me. I was still coming down from the terror. Christian was ordered by my Uncle Gene to never come near me again. It worked. They moved a few months later, and in that time I only saw Christian at family outings, and he would never talk to me. I kept within arm's length of anyone who was safe. When he was around, my dad brought me to the bathroom. My mom's left hand was devoted to holding my right. He never got the opportunity to catch me alone. Now that we're all adults, we all have a social media account. Christian tries to add me on Facebook and my other social media outlets, but I block him, and a few months later another of his accounts will try to add me. For what it's worth, I hope to never see him again at another family gathering. Not likely, since he was disowned by Uncle Gene a few years later. So this happened today. I'm still so creeped out by it. I was waiting at a bus stop to catch a bus home. I left college earlier than usual. While waiting for the bus to arrive, I thought I'd check my emails. All of a sudden this man approached me and says, in the most creepy monotone voice ever, "Sweetheart, what is the time now?" I know it might sound perfectly normal and even polite to say it that way, but where I live, nobody would speak in English the first time they say or ask you something. They'd speak in the local dialect and would only switch to a different language if you asked them to, and even then I highly doubt that some stranger would refer to you as sweetheart, maybe dear, but that's about it. I was creeped out by the way he spoke those words, but I didn't want to seem rude, so I looked up at him. Anyway, I was about to say it's 3:15, but I bolted as soon as I saw him. This man, around 40 years old, I guess, had a huge open wound on his cheek with dried up blood smudged across his face. And he was standing way too close to me. He was about a foot from me, he wasn't. Panting as if he'd just been in a fight. He didn't seem to care that his face was all bloody. He didn't seem to be in any pain, and he seemed perfectly in control of his body. He didn't seem drunk, but maybe he was, but it didn't seem like it to me. I don't know how to describe it properly, but imagine a man walking up to you with a huge gash across his face and asking you what time it is, as if he knows you. I didn't say a word. I just jogged away from that man, and he left too, because when I turned to look back at him, he was gone. I got on the very next bus that arrived. I didn't even ask where it went. I just got on, because there was no way in hell that I would spend another second at that bus stop. When I was like 3 or 4, my grandmother passed away, and soon after, all of my extended family flew into town to have the funeral. A week after the funeral, some relatives were still in town, including my uncle and his family. My grandmother wanted us to sell the house after she passed, so my family did exactly that. It was hectic because we were trying to pack everything up. Meanwhile, everyone still had to go to work in school on one of the days that we had to pack up the house. My parents both had work, my older cousins had school, and my uncles and aunts had jobs and other stuff. However, my uncle was available to watch me for a couple of hours, so he did. According to him, I asked to go to the bathroom while he was watching TV. The closest bathroom was in my grandparents' old room, so I went there. When I came back, I asked my uncle who the nice lady was on the bed. He kind of played along with it because he must have thought it was an imaginary friend or something. He asked me questions about her to entertain me. I described her as dark-haired, kind of white, and wearing a blue nightgown. When I said that, my uncle freaked out because my grandmother always wore a light blue nightgown to sleep. After that, my uncle and I left the house and waited outside for my parents to come back home. I lived in a house that seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers. Every event that happened never involved some mysterious figure, but a known person being in a place where they should not have been. Here are a few examples. I was a teenager at the time, and I was instant messaging my girlfriend at the time with my webcam turned on. I had the viewer up so that I could see myself in the webcam. Behind me there were stairs leading up and the entrance to the living room. My younger sister would typically fall asleep every night on the couch in front of the TV and make her way up to bed in the middle of the night. At one point in my webcam view, I saw my sister leave the living room and go up the stairs. The thing that struck me as odd was that I didn't hear anything. It was an older Victorian house, so the wooden floor and stairs were loud as Without saying anything to my girlfriend, I got up and looked into the living room, and there was my sister passed out on the couch. I sat back down and asked my girlfriend if she'd seen anything in my camera. She said, "Yeah, I just saw your sister go upstairs." My family was all getting ready to go somewhere. I was sitting in the car with my mom, and we were waiting on my sister, who was still in the house. A bit after, she comes out and gets in the car and just looks at me like, "What the I ask her what's wrong, and she says that just before she walked out of the house, she thought I was still inside, died, so she yelled up the stairs, "Kevin, we're leaving," and apparently I yelled back, "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." My mom woke up to someone tapping her foot, and she said someone was standing at the end of her bed, who faded out after a couple of seconds. She said it looked like me. I had an encounter where I woke up and felt someone was under my covers, laying up against me. When I said something, my blanket visibly deflated, and I no longer felt anything. It laid like my girlfriend would have laid against me. When I was 22, I was in the military, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It still took like a year after the diagnosis to separate from the military, but I went home on leave for the holidays about a month after the diagnosis. Anyone that has insulin-dependent diabetes typically carries around some sort of kit. Mine is a black zip-up pouch, and it has a glucometer, insulin pen needles, and alcohol pads. Right after I left home to head back from leave, my mom texts me to ask if I'm missing my diabetic kit. I look and I'm not. She sends me a picture of a diabetic kit and asks if I know it. I've never seen this kit before in my life. Apparently my sister went into her bedroom and discovered it outside of her window, popped up like someone had set it there. Oh, also her bedroom is on the second floor. Nobody else we know has diabetes. Myself and some buddies were bored one night and decided to head out and poke around an abandoned mental hospital. The only way in was through an autopsy room. The rest of the place was pretty much sealed off, so we go in, myself and another guy and 2 girls. As Soon as we get into the autopsy room, one of the girls starts hyperventilating and crying. She said she just couldn't be there anymore. We tried everything we could to convince her everything was going to be fine, to no avail. She wanted to leave and wanted to leave. Now disappointed, we decided we had to leave. The two girls were walking in front of us, one trying to comfort the other while the other guy and I walked a bit of way behind. I don't know what brought me to look back, morbid curiosity maybe, but I did. Now I'll admit it was dark, but the moon was out, so it wasn't pitch black. Still, I know what I saw: a window on the second floor, what looked just like a little girl in a white dress staring back at us. I looked for a good 10 seconds, stopped my buddy and had him look without taking my eyes off the thing, and asked him specifically, "Do you understand her?" See that I thought I may have been seeing things, or maybe it was a trick of the light, but no, we both saw it and stared for a good 20 seconds. After, I might have thought it was some kind of trick, but after 20 seconds or so, it moved. We ned out of there, passing the girls and screaming at them to get in the car. Is it possible it could have been some other people there who happened to bring a girl who might have looked from a distance to be a lot younger than she was? Yes, there were no other cars around though, so whoever it was would have had to walk a pretty good distance to get there. It could have also been a homeless family that was using the place for warmth. Who knows? All I know is what I saw. It was a little girl in a white dress staring at us from the second-story window of an abandoned mental joint at 2 in the morning. I have experienced shadow figures for a number of years. My partner is a skeptic. Was within the past 2 weeks. We have both had a number of terrifying experiences, so I will back the story as best as I can. The first time it appeared was to my partner, and my dog Paul had taken the dog over the field around 1 a.m. As he entered the field, he saw a figure to his right, but he thought it was a local teen smoking, so he didn't pay it any attention. As he got along the tree line and bent down to get the dog's mess up, he heard trees rustling and looked up. The same figure was in the bushes. It was black and featureless, a prominent figure, but a black and grayish prominent figure that looked like it could charge through you. He was terrified, and both he and the dog ran. The thing charged through undergrowth, keeping level with Paul. Branches were breaking, and it sounded inhuman. The dog dragged Paul and they until they got home. He was skeptic, but he couldn't explain it. We went down in the day, and there's no clear path through the undergrowth and no broken trees or branches. A few days after I was on the same field with the dog, I heard rustling in the bushes and felt really oppressed and negative. Suddenly, I looked towards the rustling, saw leaves moving, and went to see if it was a mouse or rat or whatever. There was nothing there, but above me in the trees was a shadow creature. I told it to go home. It was lost. I turned and walked away. We both walked the dark the following night and felt evil energy, and we knew we were being watched. We both knew exactly where we were being watched from, and both felt it at the same time. There was nothing visible there. The last incident happened at 4 a.m. this morning. I was walking down the road. Eye on a black figure moving fast caught my attention, but I thought it was the local addict, definitely a person. I came level with the alleyway. The figure had entered a black humanoid mass that radiated evil, was staring at me from what should have been its face, but it had no features. It was directly under the lamp post which was working. It felt malevolent. The best description I've heard of it is it's a bull of a thing. The feeling it gives off is worse than seeing it. I'm not usually faced by shadow people, but this thing is dark and has me worried. If anyone has any insight, I'd greatly appreciate it. On Tuesday, my best friend Sammy and 2 of her roommates Tara and Jenny were talking about our old high school. 2 days ago, our school was on top of a burial ground, and several students who have gone to school there have passed away tragically. Well, they decided to break in at 3 a.m. to explore what the school was like. Now we're 20, so we graduated only 2 years ago. Jenny was scared and did not want to go inside, so she stayed in my friend's car in the driver's seat in case they all needed to leave. So Sammy and her other roommate Tara decided to jump the gate and explore. They thought the energy seemed kind of scary, but they were curious and kept walking. They reached this one classroom in the back, and that's when my friend looked inside. She said the lights and all the hallways were red. I think it's just a feature they added. When she looked into the classroom, she saw a black silhouette of a person in the classroom close to the door. She said even though she couldn't make out a face, she felt it was watching them. She grabbed Tara and told her calmly that they needed to leave because someone was there. They sprinted back to the car and they all left. They then went to our old middle school to see what it looked like. Now they couldn't get in because the Gates were locked, so Jenny asked Sammy if she wants to get back into the driver's seat since it's her car, and Sammy declines, so Jenny pulls out and leaves. It's about 3:30 to 3:45 a.m. At this point, as she pulls out and starts driving back to their apartment, they see these two white blinding lights coming towards them. They couldn't tell if it was a car since the lights were so bright. 2 seconds later they realized it was a wrong-way driver coming at them at about 80 miles per hour, and Jenny was able to swerve around it at the last second as the car zoomed straight past them without realizing. Luckily, they saw cops pulled over on the side of the road ahead. They told the cops, and they immediately dispatched someone to go follow the car. They were silent for the rest of the night because of how terrifying the experience was. The scary part is that last week a girl who had just graduated from our high school was driving up to Maryland for Thanksgiving with her parents to visit her brother, and they swerved into the southbound lane and died in a head-on collision. Sammy was telling her roommates about it right before they left the middle school and almost died. She is 100% sure she saw a person at the school, but isn't sure if it was a real person or something else. Our school doesn't have late security or cleaners, and I'm not sure why, but when she told me the story I felt a strong gut feeling that it was something else. The night just felt too perfectly lined up. I believe that humans are scarier than anything paranormal, but my gut just tells me she encountered something else. If anyone could give any input at all, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. I'll say it in the beginning, I don't really believe in premonitions and such, but I don't have an explanation for what happened. I don't know if I would say the only possibility is paranormal, but it was damn weird. I have had several dreams similar to what I'm posting. I've been a caver in Florida for about 13 years since I was about 6, and have been to a lot of caves. I've never been afraid before this to go in one. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I started having this reoccurring dream. I would have it at least twice a year, always the same. Even though I would realize I was dreaming after the first few iterations, I would fall asleep and dream of being in a cave and going into this little hole in the bottom. Inside I would see a 10 to 15 t long corridor about 2 to 4 feet high, and at the end it would always turn left, and I always saw a bent red stop sign at the end, like someone ripped off the top 2 feet and tossed it in, but I would always follow the corridor. I would turn and walk past the sign despite being scared, despite many times knowing what was there, and the corridor would start descending quickly, opening up into a large vertical chamber with a path leading down in a corkscrew. Everything became blurry at this point, but it was always the same. I saw trash scattered on the walls. I saw the pit leading down to a curved floor. I saw things, undefined animals or people or something else at the bottom, and I saw my family, each with one of the things being tortured and killed every time, and I could never do anything. After I saw that, I would be stuck for a few seconds until I felt more, then saw everything turn and look at me, and I would wake up, not like a normal dream where your consciousness would just drift off, or a nightmare where you'd bolt up in fear, but like something pushed me out, like I wasn't supposed to be there. So I have this dream multiple times a year until I turned 15. My father decided to take us to some caves we'd never been before, one of which was Dog Drop. It was likely named so because someone either threw their pet in there or a coyote fell in, and the body was later discovered. Dog Drop had a roughly 30 rappel straight down to enter. I went down with my brother while my father waited up at the top. There was a hole in the ground. I started to feel uneasy, though I didn't know why, so I followed my brother into the hole. I felt worse as I moved down, and when I looked up, I saw the same corridor, the same turn, the same wall, the same bottles at the corner, and I was instantly hit with this overwhelming sense of nausea and fear and being watched, and everything was screaming at me to leave. I froze and must have made some noise because my brother turned around and asked what was wrong. I managed to say I wanted to leave now and climbed out as quickly as I could, followed immediately by my brother. We packed up and left. I've never gone back, and never will. I haven't told anyone what actually happened. I just said I wasn't feeling well, and they forgot pretty quickly. The thing that really makes it creepy for me is I have never had this dream again. Year after year I would have it consistently, but it just stopped after that. But I still remember it all, and I still feel afraid, almost an external fear, when I think of it. My husband went out of town for his first work trip following the birth of our first child, so it was myself, my infant daughter, and a dog at home, and I'm counting it as alone considering I was the only one awake and verbal in the house at the time. I just put my daughter down for bed, and was in the kitchen cleaning up when I suddenly heard our garage door open, something that should not be possible with my husband literally in another state. I raced to lock the door coming into the house from the garage and crouched next to it for at least 3 minutes. I had my phone out and dialed 911, trying to listen for any sounds of intrusion before cracking the door open just enough to reach my arm through and close the garage again. I did not sleep well that night and had at least 3 more mysterious garage openings overnight in the following week. It turns out that when I paired a spare garage door opener the day prior, one of our neighbors was arriving home and just so happened to use their opener at the exact moment I pressed the link button in our garage. It took me an absurd amount of time to make the connection because they honestly don't go in and out of their house very frequently. In any case, that first instance had me acting out parts of a home intrusion scene in a horror movie. This is a story of someone I knew and had to cut ties with because he was a psycho. The first half will be to add context as to why I cut him off, and the second half is what makes it a let's not meet. It started about 4 years ago when I was living in a friend's house while attending a nearby university. It was myself, my friend, his sister, and their parents. Roughly about 2 weeks into staying there, my friend's sister invited her boyfriend to live in the house too, and by all accounts he was a pretty cool guy at first, very sociable and full of great stories. We often sat around the table for drinks or talked about life, having a smoke in the garden. Within the first month, however, as he started to get comfortable, crack started to show in this veneer. He would rant about government conspiracy, how he was always a wrong party, he was big into Sigma male, and martial arts, and Christ did he have a temper. He had this big dog he always kept in a cage that was extremely violent. When he wasn't around, the dog attacked his girlfriend and had to be put down. That's when the guilt trips toward her began, and the ranting became incessant. About 2 months later, he had the bright idea to live in a shipping container and tracked his girlfriend along for the ride. I'm not talking about one of those chic little restoration jobs. This was a rented container in a storage yard among the outskirts of the town we were living in. He would intimidate and threaten the staff there constantly until they called the police. This, of course, was another conspiracy. He became increasingly abusive to his girlfriend, to the point where the family got involved to get her out of there. I stuck close to them, having to pretend to be on his side until we could safely get her out. They broke up, which he blamed me for, claiming I was poisoning her against him to make her mine. She has a new partner now, and they are happy. We all blocked the psycho ex on everything possible, but he continued to harass them until eventually he disappeared, or so we thought. Fast forward to last year. Here I started to receive messages over social media from several different accounts, blocking each one in turn. When I discovered who it was, some friendly and some hostile. One of these profiles, however, was pretending to be someone I knew from university. We talked about life and how things were going. Eventually, I was invited to a house party, claiming it was a free house and plenty of people were coming. I booked the time off work, made my plans, and kept talking to this friend. Coming up to the date of the party, I mentioned it to my friend's sister, and she was interested in going herself until I mentioned the address, and she panicked. The address in question was a property belonging to the crazy ex's father that was scheduled for sale. I waited until the day of the party and called the police to check the property, claiming a suspected break-in. They found 5 people there, including the ex, and parked out the front was a butcher's van equipped for food storage and a collection of knives, hammers, and rope. I'm glad I didn't go. 1988, we were renting a refurbished house that was part look cabin from the 1700s. I was on the john in the bathroom when I heard 3 very loud knocks on the wall beneath the bathroom window. I looked out the window. Nada. 30 seconds later it happened again. And again, nothing outside. Later my wife and I decided to plant some stuff beneath the bathroom window outside, and 4 in down we hit a concrete slab. It turns out the bathroom used to be an entranceway to the log house. It was spooky as how. For the record, we lived in that house for 3 years and never heard these knocks before or after. We actually built a log house that we moved into and have now lived in it for 30 years, so we are well aware of the pops and of the sounds logs can make as they expand and contract seasonally. And the knocks I heard that day weren't even close. They sounded exactly like someone knocking on a door. Funny thing is that I'm not a believer in ghosts or the supernatural, nor am I religious, so to me this was just a weird, unexplainable thing that happened 2 feet away from me while sitting on the toilet. My wife reminded me about my Fluorescent light spookiness. Here's that story. The Loch Sea we built is huge. 5,500 feet that I designed around a 1933 Moeller pipe organ that we pulled out of a church in Bavia, Illinois. About 500 pipes and a bunch of wind chests and a huge 16T wide walnut cabinet for the pipes. I had my shop in the basement where I did part of the organ restoration, which took me 2 years to complete. I finally had all the wind chests, wiring, and cabinet ready to go, and was staging all the wood and metal pipes to go into the organ. I would grab a pipe from the G garage where they were stored, put it on my workbench for cleaning, then upstairs to go into the organ. I have 3 double bulb fluorescent fixtures above my workbench, and I noticed that each time I brought another pipe in, one of the 3 fixtures would be dark, a different fixture each time, and I never saw one go from light to dark or dark to light. It would just change while I was getting the next pipe. This never happened again in the 30 years we've been in the house. This organ was dedicated to Christine Benson, a spinster member of the church who paid for the organ in 1933. My wife has always been convinced that Christine was signaling her approval of my restoration efforts. In any case, the organ is the central feature of the house, plays great, and is well loved. So that's my spooky true story. And to clarify, the spooky knocks happened in a renovated Logos that we rented for 3 years until our large Logos was built. The organ and pipes were stored in the garage at the rental house until we moved and I began the organ restoration. My wife believes that Christine knocked on the bathroom wall telling me to get my lazy ass busy with moving and restoration, and the spooky fluorescent lights were her thanking me for getting it done. Not likely, but it makes a decent story. This was about 7 years ago on a dark stretch of road near a main intersection in a major Bay Area city. I worked at a big-name healthy grocery store from 2014 to 2017. I was lucky to meet and work with amazing co-workers, some of whom have become my best and closest friends. One of my best friends, Cal, is one of the nicest, most caring people I've ever met. He's incredibly generous, genuine, and warm and welcoming to everyone, sometimes to a fault. I'm a female, and at the time of the story I was in my early 20s, and Cav is a guy, and he was in his late 20s. See, and I had a weekly ritual of driving around the city after work and talking, sometimes about our problems, sometimes about what was going well, but it was therapeutic and always something to look forward to. This particular night, we invited our buddy Ben to join us. His department always got out 30 to 45 minutes after the rest of the store, so Cav and I decided we would do a short drive around the area to pass the time until Ben was off. Cab was driving that night. We did our drive and were headed back to the store to pick up Van. In order to get back to the store, we needed to make a U-turn at a 4-way intersection. To get to the intersection, we had to go down a dark but short stretch of road. The intersection is well lit, always busy, and has a shopping center plaza on each side from the dark street stretch of road. It's exactly 302 feet to the main well-lit and ever busy intersection. As we're driving down the dark section, C suddenly interrupts what I was saying and says, "Oh my God, did you see that person waving?" He slows down the car. As I look back, "No, what are you talking about?" I asked. "You didn't see them? There was someone in a black hoodie waving us down." I'm looking back. I have poor eyesight. It's dark. "No, I don't see anyone. There's no one there." As I'm saying this, Cav is pulling into an empty parking lot parallel to the dark stretch of road. He reaches to the back seat and is moving jackets and other stuff off the seat, obviously making room for this person. "No, Cav," I said, "no one is getting in this. No, there's no one there, and if there were, they could walk up to the intersection." "No," he agrees, but insists we continue to circle around and check. I reluctantly agree, but realize I have no choice anyway. We circle back, and sure enough, there's a girl roughly in her early 20s standing alone, wearing all black. She looks to read and is sort of crying. Maybe. Cav rolls down the passenger window halfway and asks her if she's okay. She seems off. I immediately have awful vibes from her. "4 guys stole my purse," she says with her hands over her face. "It had my wallet. I literally lost everything, and I don't have a phone." The weirdest thing about this is that she wasn't crying. She was stretching her words out and whining, but she wasn't crying. I said, "Okay, we'll call the police for you. Why don't you walk up to the plaza at the main intersection? We'll wait with you for the police." "No," she says adamantly, "it won't help. I already called the police an hour ago." This is when I started to freak out. She just said she didn't have a phone. She's been standing In the dark for an hour, I thought you didn't have a phone. I said I do, but it's dead, she replied back. All of this happening rapid fire, and before I can really mentally get into what's going on, C tells her to get in the car so we can help her. I say walk up to the plaza and we'll help you. Cav locks the door and says no, don't worry, we'll drive you there. The girl has her hands in the front pocket of her hoodie and gets into the car. I'm pissed, fuming. The girl's acting really weird. I remember at this point that I have my box cutter on me. I reach down into my backpack and I'm rummaging through my stuff to find it. Cav is talking to her, but everything she says is contradictory. She says that she isn't from this area, has no idea where she is. Yet she tells us she grew up and lives about 6 blocks away. As we're driving, she says she wants to go to a particular bar that she could really use a drink. I thought you don't have your wallet or ID? I asked. I keep looking for my box cutter, and I'm looking back at her. She has a waxy complexion and looks me in the eyes as if she's looking through me. It gives me the creeps. Cav is incredibly kind to her, the idiot, and keeps saying positive things, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. While this is happening, I find my box cutter, open it all the way, and hold it in my lap. I turn my back and keep my eyes on her. She tells us she has a boyfriend nearby and asks us to take her there. She and CF continue to talk, and she said she was kicked out of her parents' house. Her hands still remain in pocket and mine remains holding the box cutter because of this whole ordeal. We've totally forgotten about Ben still watching her. I pull my phone out and call in. I'm explaining to Ben what's happening, and in a matter of seconds she went from asking us for money and alcohol and saying weird __ to just wanting to get out of the car. We did not drop her at her boyfriend's house, but a few streets away in our random neighborhood. We drop her off and there's silence for a few seconds in the car. Oh my god, Cap says, laughing. She could have robbed us or killed us. Yeah, idiot. I'm 100% certain at the very least she was planning to rob us. Looking back, there's so much I would have done differently. We were lucky nothing happened, but I am positive that there was evil in that car that night. This was over 20 years ago, but still creepy. I was at an amusement park with some of my friends, and as I'm waiting in line for the roller coaster, I see a guy that has a t-shirt on that says 68 and I owe you one. I giggled as I read it. He looks me in the face. We acknowledge each other, and that's that. I don't even think we exchanged words. The next day, I'm at home with my roommate, and my roommate says, hey, yeah, you have a visitor. I go upstairs from my room and see these 2 guys in my house that I don't even recognize. Yes, they've been invited in innocently enough, as I'm sure that my roommate didn't know that the guy was a stalker. I was so puzzled that I had to ask who they were and also where we met. The guy says, remember yesterday I saw you at the park? I asked him how he knew where I lived, and he brazenly admits that he followed me home. So now he and his friend are in my house. I'm feeling really uncomfortable. I mustered up the courage to politely tell him and his friend to leave and to never come back. Luckily my roommate was there, who was a male, so I felt like I had some backup, but then he was the one who lit these fools and they left peacefully, probably embarrassed. Fortunately, I never saw either one of them again, but I was on high alert status for the longest time after the story. 3. This has been on my mind since my sister told me today. I live with my sister. She has 2 small dogs that also live there. I have 2 cats and sleep with my door open so they can go in and out as they want. My sister sleeps with her dogs in her room with the door shut. When she gets up in the morning, her dogs run out and get in my bed with me because I usually sleep in later. My boyfriend spends the night most nights and leaves our house around 7:45 a.m. to go to work, where he clocks in at 9 o'clock a.m. I sleep with no lights and blackout curtains. My boyfriend does not turn any lights on. He just leaves the room to get ready. This morning my mom was here while I slept because her and my sister were going to go out shopping. My sister's alarm went off, and around 10 a.m. she got up to go to the bathroom. She said she noticed my door was shut, which is unusual, and she went to the bathroom. When my sister came out of the bathroom, she could see my door was now open and her dog just sitting in my room and staring. This would be the first time in almost 3 years they haven't just immediately hopped on my bed. She told her dog to lay down or come out with her, but her dog didn't move. She came into my room to grab her dog and was startled to see my boyfriend sitting up in the bed next to me because he's usually gone for work before she gets up. The room was pitch black, except she said there was a light on him, like he had his phone on or something. She left quickly because she Was embarrassed to have come in while my boyfriend was still in bed with me. She said I was sleeping in bed on my side. She asked my mom if she'd open my door, but my mom said no. Later I wake up around 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and my mom and sister asked me why my boyfriend went to work late than usual. Me never waking up when he leaves, said I didn't know, but that maybe he overslept. I called my boyfriend and asked what time he left, and he said in a confused voice that he left at 7:45 a.m. like normal. My sister did not believe that, so I asked him to send a picture of his clock in slip. It showed he clocked in at 9 a.m. He would have been at work before. My sister even woke up. There was no light on in my room. I do not have lamps next to my bed, and my phone was under my pillow when I woke up, so even if it was a pillow or something in the dark, neither me or my sister can come up with an explanation for the light, let alone why she saw a person in bed with me when I was alone, or how my door opened itself. Was this a ghost, a time slip, a glitch in the Matrix? Does anyone have any ideas on what could explain this? I have a story to tell you that happened to me on Sunday, October 29th, 2022. My father for the story will be Daniel TRM and I Joan. TRM, I currently live in Can, about 2 hours away from my parents. My parents live in their apartment on the outskirts. After a pleasant weekend with my girlfriend visiting our families, we return home after an hour-and-a-half drive. We grab some McDonald's and settle in front of a series. At that moment, I receive a call from an unknown number at 9 p.m. Generally, I don't answer unknown numbers, especially at this hour, due to harassment issues in school that left lasting effects. However, I felt a strange sensation and decided to answer, thinking it might be important. I answer, and after saying hello, someone immediately asks, "Are you the son of Daniel TRM?" I of course answer yes. It didn't surprise me at that moment because my father had been a salesman for 35 years in the same company, and my phone number was his 15 years ago, so I sometimes get calls from very old clients of his. We don't have the same voice, so it didn't surprise me to be asked, "Are you the son?" After confirming, the person says directly, "Your father had a car accident." Panic rises in me. I start trembling. My girlfriend is next to me and immediately senses that something is wrong. I was petrified because the tone used by the stranger clearly meant he is dead. In panic, I asked where, how, and the crucial question, "Who are you?" They tell me they're a witness to the accident and my father was taken to hospital. I panic and shout, asking where did the accident happen? How? The person says the car flipped. Trembling, I explain to my girlfriend, and he says he wants to call his wife. I hang up immediately. At that moment, I conclude that my mother wasn't with him. For your information, my parents sometimes have significant arguments, and my dad occasionally goes for a drive. My mother has been ill for years and goes to bed at 6 p.m. every day, so I knew I wouldn't reach her, but I try. I call my mother, no answer, and I call my sister, who is more sensitive and has a panic attack, screaming on the phone. I tell her to wake up our mother immediately because she's not answering the phone. At the same time, my girlfriend calls her mother to ask her to call hospitals around Groby to find out where he is. Meanwhile, I get the number again for more information, repeating where did it happen, where the person avoids the question, and after a few seconds gives me the road number. I shout at him, who knows road numbers to where, which city, which village, and then it clicks. I think, wait, I was with my father at 5 p.m. I'm home now. It's impossible for him to have traveled 4 hours at the same moment. My girlfriend immediately calls my father on his mobile. My father answers disdainfully, yes. She says, "Daniel, you didn't have an accident," and he laughs and says, "Absolutely not. I'm on my couch watching football." I tell the person on the phone that my father is alive. He says, "But you're not Matto Truck Moosh." I reply that I have no Matto in my family and that I am Joan. The man apologizes, but in a way that gave me a chilling feeling, as if he'd achieved what he wanted to see me panic. I asked him 5 times how he got my number, and he never answered. He says, "Sorry for scaring you." I hang up, inform my sister, and calm her down. Later, I exchanged messages with them because I didn't understand how he got my number, which cannot be found anywhere on the internet. He told me that my number was displayed on the first page of Google in a directory. I searched the internet thoroughly with my girlfriend that evening, and it's impossible, and the messages were strange. He mentioned a Lauren, even though he clearly said my dad's name. He apologized for his clumsiness that he managed to contact his wife, that this person is deceased. After a few days, my sister-in-law, who was a surgeon, told me that it's the firefighters who contact the family, not random people like that. Even those involved. Moreover, when there are deaths on the road, there is always a press article or even an obituary that I never found. I tried calling the number a week later for answers, and the number was no longer assigned. Was it a bad joke? Was it someone who wanted to see me panic? How did he get my number? Just writing and remembering this moment gives me chills. In fall 2016, I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, the stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and drug addicts. The owner basically turned it into a weird duplex. My friend had lived in it right before I moved in, and he claimed it was haunted. I didn't really believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyways, the layout of the house was weird. You walked in the door and were in a living room type space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to a bedroom, and past that was the kitchen. No doors. The only doors inside the apartment was to the bathroom and one that led to the shared basement. So my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself in a long time and I was just feeling lonely and on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 o'clock in the morning. Cliché. I know what woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers were drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony of sound. After about 2 or 3 minutes I finally gathered up the balls to get up and check on it, and as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. A couple of days later a friend was visiting and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor 3 feet away. It flew past the dresser the shelf was perched on and landed between the two of us. My friend just gave me a creeped out look and said he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he'd lived there for 8 years. He told me that no one stayed longer than a year and they all reported the same. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. It doesn't make sense, but there it is. So a lot of what happened was really small stuff. You would just hear stuff shuffling around in the room you weren't in the light to. The basement would randomly come on at night, even when the neighbor was traveling. Sometimes I would feel something get into my bed like a cat, and nothing was there. I had a lot, and I mean a lot of nightmares there. That was the bulk of it, but I have 2 stories that were more notable, and here they are. So the first one isn't that long, but once again I was woken up sometime in the middle of the night to a loud crashing sound. So in the living room there was an old electric organ with about 6 in of clearance from the wall. I stash a folding chair like you would buy at IKEA in between the organ and the wall. The CRA sound was the folding chair being unfolded and slammed into the middle of the room. By this point I actually did have cats, and they were just sitting there staring at it when I came into the room. Second, I will admit, as a conventional explanation, that I actually find much scarier than if it were paranormal. So at some point I reconnected with an old friend who had moved home from California when his dad got cancer. He ended up living with me, which was not ideal because, as I said earlier, there were no doors, no privacy. But we became close friends. Being poor, we made it work. So he ended up dating this girl who lived about 3 blocks down the road and would often leave and sleep over there. I got him a job where I worked 9 to 5, and we would alternate driving to work in the mornings. Anyways, one night he's over at the girl's house spending the night in, and I went to bed. Sometime in the night, he came back home and he went to the bathroom, which was in my room. Remember, no doors, so he had to walk past my bed to use the toilet. I wake up, he's in there taking a piss, and I can see the light on under the door. When he's done, he turns the lights off and lays down on the couch to sleep like usual. It was winter and the cats had been escaping and coming back late at night, and one of them had been outside earlier, so I wondered if he'd come in with my roommate, and if not, if he would have seen him come home and would be waiting at the door. So I decided to get up and check. I got to the door, open it, no Luke. I close the door and he's sitting there right by my feet with his sister. Okay, I look at the couch. My roommate is already fast asleep. As usual, all is good. I go back to sleep. I wake up in the morning and my roommate is gone. I go about my routine and step out to smoke a cigarette while my car warms up. As it gets closer to 9, I begin to debate leaving him to drive himself when I see him come sprinting down the sidewalk. We get in the car and Start to work, I ask him what time he left in the morning to go back for seconds at his girlfriend's place. He said he was there all night, and I about my pants, so I know for a fact the door was locked because the door had some ancient lock design that locked automatically every time you used it. I also know for a fact that my cat was outside, and in the morning he was back in the house. I don't know what to make of it, but it was really unsettling. And just for fun, a third story, I said earlier, my house was not far from a park that drug addicts in the home frequented in summer 2017. It was late and I heard a bunch of noise on my porch, so I went to investigate. There were two guys huddled right by my steps with a flashlight. I asked them what the _ they were doing. They replied using English, but not something I would describe his language. Then they started walking towards the park through my yard. And the whole time one of them was just calling back to me, "Hey, it's the dark, so sorry." So my mom and I have lived in this house for 8 years. My sister and dad used to live here, but they moved out after my mom and dad broke up. A woman died in our house, and my neighbor knew her. She said that she had did and other things. She also told me that Norma, the woman who died in my house, used to wake the kids up for school who slept in my room that were hers. The only reason I had asked was because beforehand I had a dream about someone who woke me up for school and called me sweetheart and honey. I knew it wasn't my mom because my mom never uses those names with me. I also couldn't see, but I could see my body, but not them, and I couldn't move. That was the first thing that happened. When I'm home alone, I hear people calling my name in a whisper. They also say hey, but this also happened when I was with my dad in the woods, but I knew it wasn't him. My sister said she always heard it in the woods too. When my sister and dad still lived there, I would hear someone walking up the stairs, but my sister wasn't awake, and my parents never come upstairs. This still happens, but only when it's late at night. My mom told me she's at sleep paralysis alone in this house, and she's never had it before. She said she saw a man in her room, and this also happened to me. I was falling asleep on a chair in the living room. I was listening to the buzz from our heater when it turned into a flatline, and I felt someone standing over me. They were pure white, but had human body parts and looked like a very tall man. I couldn't move and was scared to death. After a few minutes he left, and I woke up, or what felt like it. Our kitchen is connected to our basement. For that whole week I told myself there was a man in the kitchen, and I refused to go in there until a picture of him showed up in my mind, and I told my mom what he looked like, and she freaked out. The man turned out to be her grandmother's dad, who died when she was my age, so I never met him, and there were no photos of him. Another night I was sleeping in my bed until I woke up to somebody rubbing my thigh. I wouldn't open my eyes because I didn't want to see anything. He told me how lucky I was to have him. As he continued to rub my thigh, I quickly got up and ran to my mom. I was scared, and I didn't sleep in my room for a month. My mom had dropped me off at school. Now mind you, I have to be at school at 7 a.m., so it was 6:40 when she dropped me off, and when she came back, our dog, Emmy, was out. Emmy is a good girl. She's very well trained, and she was just sitting in our yard. The front door was locked, so my mom checked our cameras to see how she got out, and she never did. She never got out of the front door. When we were leaving, my mom found her still asleep on her bed. I don't know what to think about it, but here it goes. Around 8 years ago, I was on vacation with my parents, and my cousin, my sister, couldn't come as she just started her first job, so she stayed home by herself. When we were children, both my sister and I used to be really close, mainly because we shared a room. For my first 7 to 10 years, we used to have our code with TS for asking things like, "Are you already asleep?" or "Are parents asleep?" Stuff like that. She's also always doing something or looking for something to do, always being the first up. So when she was up and wanted me to wake up, she would place her face as close to mine as possible and stare at me. I don't know how long she would stay like this, but I can clearly remember multiple times waking to her doing this. I, of course, would shout or at least panic until realizing it was her. I guess it was fun for her, and I have to admit it. I also did it a couple of times. So now we're on our trip. It's been at least 10 to 12 years since the last time my sister pulled this prank on me. My sister and I are not as close as we used to be. We have certainly grown a little apart, but we still love each other. It was the last night on our trip before heading back to our city, and we just found this nice hotel close to the pyramids in Pelin, which meant no cell phone service. We were sharing a room, my mom and dad in the first bed, and my cousin and I in the other one. At some point around 4 a.m., I woke up to the same Old sensation that someone is staring at me, so I opened my eyes and I could clearly see her face. My immediate reaction was to shout, waking my mother up. I have to say that this sensation by itself is really scary, but years of experience with my sister after waking me up like this took the threat away, so despite my shouting I wasn't scared. It was just too familiar. My mom turned on the light and asked me what happened. I told her that I was pretty sure that my sister had just woken me up. I know it didn't make any sense, but I felt it was her, though I cannot say I saw her face. I just saw a face and then it disappeared. Immediately, my mom is really superstitious, so she couldn't sleep after that because she felt something was odd, and I couldn't sleep thinking of my sister. Later that day in the morning, we noticed we all had lots of missed calls. My sister was involved in a really bad car accident. Luckily, she only had minor injuries. To this day, I don't know what to make out of this experience. My brain tells me it was just a coincidence. On the other hand, it's the only way I would have thought of my sister sleeping. It was just so real. So between both of us, as an extra on our previous visit to Pink at the ruins, we could hear some drums. My parents said that it was raining and we were playing with the pawns, and at some point the drums started playing. Our curiosity made us follow the sound, getting us deeper and deeper into the jungle. I can't remember why we stopped, but when we finally made it to the exit and asked the security guy about the music, he said, "So you heard the drums as well?" He then proceeded to tell us that a lot of people have heard them at different times and they didn't know the source of it. I was somewhere between the ages of 10 to 14 when this happened. Growing up, I lived on a very boring street in a middle-class one-story house. My bedroom faced to the front veranda, which had a lot of plants just around the corner, and down the hall from my bedroom was a study that was used as a spare room / compu room. I used to watch TV in that room, and on this particular night it was very hot, so I opened the door to the veranda. There was a thin fly screen with no lock which we would pull across when that door was open. When I went to bed, it was so hot that I kept my bedroom windows and curtains wide open. I was having trouble sleeping and laid there staring at the ceiling. Then I heard what sounded like someone walking around on the veranda. The ground was cement pebbles, and there was a lot of dirt from the potted plants, and it made a very distinct sound when you walked on it. At first I assumed it was one of my parents, but it was very late at night, and that wouldn't have made any sense. I craned my neck to look out the window. In the dark, I saw a gaunt, skeletal, hunched over figure slowly shuffling towards my bedroom window. It made a raspy sound as it shuffled around. I was fairly certain it couldn't see me, but from the way its head was moving, it looked like it was searching for something. Despite this fairly creepy thing happening outside my bedroom window, I still felt somewhat safe in the comfort of my own bed inside my locked house. Then I realized I'd left the study door open. All that stood between whatever the hell this thing was and my house was a thin screen door with no lock. I knew I had to lock that door, and fast. This thing was almost at my bedroom window and would soon be at the study door. I slid out of bed and crawled on my stomach out of my room and down the hall to the study. As I reached the door, intending to quickly close it, I realized my mistake. I would have to open the screen door in order to reach the door to close it from where I was laying. I could see this thing hunched over and peering into my bedroom window. I think it hurt or sensed me laying there, because it turned and shuffled over and bent down to where I was laying. I held my breath as this thing put its face right against the screen and peered in at me, its raspy breath sounding like death. In the dark, I could make out part of a face. It looked gaunt, sickly, either with a very thin or no skin. I couldn't see any eyes, or there were simply empty sockets. I didn't move as its face pressed up against the fly screen, seemingly looking right at me. Suddenly, its face distorted in terror, its eye sockets and mouth opening wide, and leaked out a blood-curdling shriek, a shriek that sounded like fear, and it bolted off into the night. I lay there silently frozen in fear and disbelief over what had just happened, and listening to make sure it was gone. As soon as I dared to move, I quickly opened the fly screen and shut and locked that veranda door. I then went back to my room and shut the windows and drew the curtains. I kept peeking through the curtain, expecting it to come back, but it never did. I've thought about this encounter ever since, and I'm not really sure what to make of it. I've never told anyone about it either. I don't know where to begin, and I've never understood why it reacted in fear when it saw me. I'm not exactly sure what to believe, since a lot of the paranormal occurrences happened to my dad, but I definitely saw and heard some creepy while living in a house in my teens. We'd very frequently just have a sense of anxiety and foreboding in the house, which on its own isn't paranormal but certainly made it very uneasy staying there. I read somewhere that radon exposure can cause anxiety, and the house did have a radon problem, so maybe that could have been it, but I also would hear footsteps around the house when I was the only one there and just constantly felt like someone was watching me. My dad got the worst of it and claimed he could hear sounds coming from the basement at night. His bedroom was right near it, where his mind was upstairs, so I never heard any of it, but I'm an extremely deep sleeper. Then the traditional slams, bangs, and crashes throughout the house, my dad also claimed. He would hear knocking on the cellar door. Sometimes he would hear a woman screaming. Supposedly every family who ever lived there experienced something. There are three distinct things that stand out. The night before we moved out, my dad claims he woke up because he felt a sudden hard tapping on his head. My brother's girlfriend was staying over and my dad and me were gone. We came back to find that his girlfriend's daughter was terrified because she saw a shadow in the corner of the room. I chalked it up to the kid's imagination running wild. One time my dad was practicing with his band in the basement and was expecting me back from a Christmas party. He claims he heard heavy footsteps from upstairs and thought it was me, so he went upstairs to greet me and nobody was home. I got home about a half hour later. It got to the point where my dad had the house blessed and the priest claims to have been terrified and refused to go into the house. At first, this was around the time I was becoming an atheist, so I didn't really believe in any of that, but I definitely experienced the uneasiness and occasional random noises, but never experienced any of the screaming or knocking my dad claims to have heard. At one point we had some people from TAPS visit us and do a sweep of the house. We got some of the obvious orb pictures, which both me and my brother thought were dumb as hell, but at one point, being a bit of an edgelord thinking I had psychic powers, told them to take a picture in one specific spot. The result was an image of what appeared to be a ghostly bust of a person with a demented face. We tried to explain it as a reflection from the washing machine, but it looked too much like a person. We also have an entry on the website, the Shadowlance, that I submitted. Look for the entry quag AP'd, as there was one hilarious instance where I came home from school one day and immediately felt the uneasiness and felt like I was definitely being watched. My blood went cold and I was starting to feel a bit panicked. I turned around and my grandmother was there and started laughing her ass off at how she had scared me. She had been there the whole time and I somehow walked right past her without seeing her. I miss you, Graham. My uncle's house out on a very eastern part of New York was said to be haunted due to the family that used to own it in the 1800s decided not to give it to the stableman and sold it instead. He and the maid were said to have haunted the place. We always used to joke that you would hear people or things moving at night, but since the house is so old we used to just laugh it off. My uncle's friend had her and her sister stay over the house one night, and the friend noticed a maid bringing towels down the stairs. When she woke, she saw the maid again bringing what looked like a percolator down the stairs. She was so impressed by my uncle hiring staff. He's a neurologist in New York City, so we had a habit of spending a little bit extra. She went back to bed and woke up later downstairs to see my uncle and his friend just chatting. She asked where the maid went and she thought that the maid was cooking breakfast. My uncle had no idea what she was talking about and asked what she looked like. The sister explained and he laughed, walked her to the living room and pointed to an old picture. She said that was the woman. My uncle replied, yeah, she's been dead for about 100 years. My wife and I went camping for our anniversary 1 year in Pack near the rim. We went to bed. It was so eerie to hear nothing but the wind in the pines. Finally, we fell asleep. I woke up with paralysis and a red light glowing outside of our tent. The light got brighter and something started unzipping our tent. I was frozen in place, just staring at the flap being unzipped. When the flap was almost opened, I was able to move my head and look at my wife's face. She had this horrible look of fear, mouth agape in everything. When she started to scream, I woke up with nothing but the wind in the pine and pitch black back. Nothing opened our tent and we were still laying there where we fell asleep. Do I think it was a nightmare? Yeah, I'm terrified of aliens and stories about them. Maybe it was my brain messing with me, or was it a repressed memory? Who knows? It scared the understanding out of me. We left the next day. This happened in August of 2013. I was visiting Montreal for their Diversite weekend, which was basically like Pride, but took place the long weekend before the official Montreal Pride. My best friend at the time had met A guy at Toronto Pride a month earlier, and he invited both of us to come there. So my friend wouldn't be uncomfortable going to spend the weekend with someone he didn't know well. We arrived on a Thursday, and the trip was going great. We went out the first night, walked the streets that were closed off to cars the next day, and our host made us a nice dinner, and then we went out again Friday night. So that Friday night we went out to a club. It was called Parking, and it was another fun night. The music was great, and the tequila shots were incredibly cheap. I was dancing and moving all around the club, but would circle back and check in with my friends and our host, and I would also run into people that I knew who were also visiting from Toronto, and ended up taking some MDMA from one of them, dank some more, until I was completely soaked in sweat. So I went to the bathroom to wipe myself down and pee. When I got to the bathroom there was someone leaving, but it looked like I was the only one in there. I went and used the stall because I was having a hard time using the urinal, and once I came out I was quite surprised to see a man in the corner of the washroom smiling at me. He looked in his mid-30s, on the shorter side, and a bit chubby. He was wearing a polo t-shirt and jeans and had glasses, and I remember thinking when I saw him he reminded me of an accountant. I'm not sure why that thought popped into my head. I was pretty sure I didn't hear the door, but I couldn't be positive, so I just smiled back and said hello as I went to wash my hands. Hello, he responded. Are you having fun tonight? I replied I was, and that the music was incredible, and was wiping myself down with paper towels in my shirt. Do you want to do some coke with me? He asked. Now, this was not the first time I'd been offered coke in a bathroom at a nightclub, and had done this in the past, and ended up having some good experiences, and met some interesting people. I was already high and drunk, and not thinking much of it, I said, sure, I would love to, thanks, I just live right near here. It's at my place. If you don't mind coming over, we can do some lines, and have a drink, and walk back to the club, he replied. Now, obviously, looking back, I realized how very dumb my following actions were, and I can't imagine myself being so stupid and careless now, but without thinking about it I agreed, and I left with him. We chatted on the walk over to his place. He asked me where I was from, because I didn't seem like I was from Montreal, and what parties I'd gone to, and how old I was, and my name. I asked his name, but he instead responded that we'd arrived. The whole walk felt like 5 minutes, but I honestly hadn't been paying much attention to where we were walking. His apartment was in this building that had 3 floors, and his unit was on the 2nd floor. You had to climb this long, narrow metal staircase, and his door seemed to be in the middle of 2 other apartments on either side. He unlocked the door and let me in first, flicked on the lights, and told me to make myself comfortable. I was walking and noticed he had carpet, so I turned around to ask him if I should take my shoes off, when I noticed that he was locking the door from the inside with the key above the regular lock, and in that moment I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread like I'd never felt before, the danger I'd possibly put myself in. And now, seeing this person locking their door from the inside with a key, I just thought to myself, I'll pretend I didn't see that. I won't take off my shoes, and I'll politely hang out for a few minutes, then asked to head back. I also thought I could be having an extreme overreaction to what I saw because I was high, but as I looked around, everything inside me was just screaming, you need to get out of here. I went and sat on the arm of the couch. He said I should take my shoes off and relax. I was getting a better look at him now in the lights of his apartment. He still looked plain and unassuming, but his eyes looked shifty, and he pulled down both of the shades on the windows that were on each side of the door. I told him that I was okay, and I was eager to get back to dancing, so he said he would make us drinks and then we could go back. The apartment looked much bigger inside than it did from the street. It was an open layout with the living room beside the kitchen, and then a hallway in the middle with closed doors painted black, and I could hear music coming from one of the doors. I asked him if someone else was there as he came from the kitchen with the glass, and he replied no. As he handed me my glass, he looked me up and down. He said with this increasingly creepy smile spreading across his face, you have a very beautiful body, especially your chest. Would you mind if I took some before photos of you before we head back? Every alarm bell is going off in my head now, and all I can think about is Jeffrey Dahmer and all of his Polaroids, and asking myself, what am I going to do? Because that was such a creepy thing to say, and all I can manage is a polite laugh as I take the drink and say, sure. Excellent, he says. He then tells me to take off my shoes, and he's going to get the coke in his camera, and told me to finish my drink. He walked down the hall, takes out his keys, and unlocks the 2nd door. He opens it enough to slip in and closes it behind him the second that door was closed. I jumped up, ran over to the sink, and dumped my drink. I put my shirt on and ran to the front door. I was able to turn and unlock the regular lock, but the door would not budge. I kept turning and pulling, but nothing. Then I heard from behind me, "What are you doing?" I turned around, and he was standing at the base of the hallway with one of those professional cameras slung around his neck and holding a square mirror with a pile of white powder on it. I thanked him for the drink, gesturing to my empty glass, but that it was getting late and I wanted to get back, but we could exchange numbers and maybe meet up tomorrow. His demeanor slightly changed. He was still smiling, but the tone when he next spoke sounded irritated. He asked me if I was nervous about taking the photos and I should just wait for my drink to relax me. I said no, I wanted to go. This exchange of him telling me to stay and me saying no went back and forth for about a minute when he suddenly glared at me, put down the mirror, pointed at the couch, and said, "Sit down now." Not knowing what to do or how I was going to get out of this, I remembered that there were other units on each side of us, and it had to be around 2:30 in the morning at this point. So I just started screaming at the top of my lungs like a madman, banging on the door, the window, the wall. "Shut up, be quiet," he snapped at me as he ran to the door. He quickly unlocked it and told me to get out and stepped aside. I bolted out of the door and down the stairs, skipping the bottom steps and hopping over the side of the railing. I looked up behind when I landed, and he wasn't there, but I did hear a door slam. I took off running down the street. I hadn't paid attention on the walk there, so I didn't know which way to walk, but I knew it was closed. Luckily, I was able to wave down a passing taxi and to have it take me back to the bar. When I got back to the bar, I found my friend in the same spot dancing. The whole incident must have been less than an hour. I was too embarrassed about how stupid I'd been, and being back in the club, I started to feel bad how I just freaked out on this nice man, so I didn't say anything, but I stayed by my friend's side until we left. Shortly after I got back, the entire thing felt quite surreal, and I remember the next day when I did tell my friend, kind of laughing it off and joking about getting murdered. I was trying to make light of it because it was so scary, and it wasn't until years later, after joining Reddit and this sub and reading other stories, that I started to think about that night more and more, and I realized how much potential danger I put myself in. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. If you have a scary story you would like me to read in an upcoming video, this is one way to help me guarantee variety in the stories I share. You can email me or post it to my subreddit. I'll drop the details in the video description. Thank you all for listening, and AAL thanks to my patrons and channel members who now have early access to Adri videos as well as other behind-the-scenes content. Thank you to Samantha Place, Cheryl Duckworth, Scoutum 405Z Harris, Unladylike 13, Ventura, California, Elizabeth Mays, Alexia Tuttle, Marshana Rainey, Wo Sapon, Mary Wright, Jessica Copperfield, Zoe D, Danielle Shaw, Jane Wiggins, Tara Harris, Mary Rye, Callie Townsend M, Dessa Edmondson, Kimmy Lowe, Wendy Maris, Confessions of a Cleaner, Megan Abrams, Miss Tycoon, Stephen Sloan, Christina Myway, Ashley Bray, Tissa Felter, Danielle, Tina Marie Heckman, Amal Garner, Lisa Redford, Deborah Malay, Connie S.U. T. Edwell, Diana Johnston, Vampy, Debs, Jasmine Davis, Erica Asser, Fox Mulder, Ram Beltron, Tina, Nick, Bosie, Sarah, C.H. Neal Kavanaugh, Tiara Sunders, Timothy Stratton, Jennifer Jenkins, Lloyd Rash, Maribel Deluna, Michael O.M., Ollie, Marissa, Kuro, Ember Hops, King Slim, Justin Beast, Gillespie, Joy, Dana, J. Blee, Anna, Stephanie McLaren, Lumine, Kami, Skin Crawler, Adara Bella, Place 2006, Michelle Welchman, Dana B, Lisa McDonald, Clar, Scott Madison, C. Wasp, Sting, Jennifer J. Ashley, Liliat, Lee T. Wyatt, Gina, Laura, J.K. 6 Fenito, Donna, Joey Big GSC, Tanya Spaghetti, Wolo King, Matthew, October Gypsy, Lisa, Ally Thomas, Build With Me, Letitia, Fran Debs, Insomnic, Kat, Stephanie Summer, Rebecca Tyra, This Bad Kitty, Your Papy Dilly, Laney, Tripping Balls Through History, Samantha, Erica, Alyssa, Tracy Killians, Place, April James, Arbor, Jen Joy, Handout, Pegasus Genesis, Karen, Kitu V, Barry, LJB, Xbox Scott, I Like Booty, Monica, Level A, Chris and Anna, Holly, Spry, Kimber, Jasmine, Centik, Heather, Haven, Kitty Cat, Luna, 2, ADHD, Aurora, Janice, Cinderella Baby, Borderline, Betty, Lady, Draco, Erica, Nicole, Snowball, Rena, Melanie, The Honeybee, 987 Pretty Girl 215 Ryan Brooke Wendy CFTY Kel Tina Dina Vampy Debs Patricia Amber Krista Brenda Absent Alice Chrissy K Spiders Web H La Andrea Sue Monique Shaw Gorman Emma Lisa Sigma Cube X Greg Chelsea Amanda Jane Sam Zeep Tay Sarah C Austin Tegan Lil Smart Jenny Gabrielle Fire 5 Sarah P James Gargan Gemma Allen Monica Level A and Alex. I hope you're doing well, guys all. See you all on the next one.